Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And if you're watching this on video, you've already seen who we've got today. And I am super excited. And I feel a little bit kind of, honoured and blessed in all kinds of things, because the man we're going to introduce in a moment has just taken on a new role. And I think I might have just snuck in before his diary becomes absolutely bonkers. So, welcome to the podcast, Andy Wolfe.
Hey, Chris, it's great to be with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing. And we first met through another Andy, Andy Spence, who has become a real, quite a good friend of mine now, which is great. And one of those, I think, for me, perfect examples of making connections creates opportunities, because I connected with Andy, who then connected with you, and then suddenly I was able to then do some Church of England stuff, which then widened my perspective, which meant I then met loads of other people, and suddenly I was on this kind of like explosion of new thinking and new perspectives. And so I owe you and the Church of England and Andy a lot, so thanks very much.
Oh, no, my pleasure. No, it's great to have you part of the family. It's great.
Brilliant. Well, let's get started with a little bit of tell us, before you tell us what your new role is, tell us what your previous role was.
Yeah, so up until basically now, I've been the Executive Director of Education for Church of England, which means that I've overseen a lot of our national work, including all the leadership development stuff, all the MPQs, all the new flourishing leaders and teachers programs, a lot of our international work, a lot of our partnership work between churches and schools. And that has been great to be doing that for a number of years. And then our current chief executive, Nigel Genders, who's been in the role for 11 years, he's stepping down to become the chief schools adjudicator from the start of February. And so, from the start of February, I'll become the interim chief executive. So, really exciting. Yeah, really cool.
Well, I mean, of course, as you know, the purpose of the podcast is to get behind really some of the stuff that we might know about the person we're talking to. So take us way, way, way back. Like, where did this all start? Where did you grow up? What did school and education?
So actually, I grew up in Birmingham, and actually did go to a Church of England primary school, actually. Right. So I probably could never have realised at age 6 or 7 what that meant. But to be fair, that's one of my some really formative experiences, like for many of us in school. And probably the most formative was a teacher he's a regular class teacher, but he was also an incredible musician as well. And I first was kind of encountered this through, I guess he was playing the piano in school assemblies. In fact, he's probably pretty much played all the kind of primary school bangers thing that's kind of really taken off, like all of those songs. I think he was probably the first person that made me think about wanting to become a musician, just seeing what he could do. And then I went on to, that to become a real passion. Went to eventually then study in Durham and did music and theology as a joint degree. My then ultimate intention was to become a professional musician, and I was in a relatively successful band for a little while, that teetered on the brink of all of that kind of kicking off with record labels and everything. But then accidentally became a teacher kind of on the side, actually. Interestingly, not in a school to start with. So my teaching career started in further education and higher education. So I was lecturing in like music production and performance and that kind of thing in an FE college in Nottingham, which is where I then lived and still do live. And to be honest, I don't know if I would have become a teacher if I'd had to do the proper like PGCE and all of that. I mean, I don't want to come across as lazy, but I'm not sure I would have. Like friends who did that, it looked pretty stressful. I'm not sure I would have. I don't know. Hindsight, who knows? But anyway, I became a lecturer, and then was doing that for about 5 years, and I was a program lead for music and so on, and creative arts. And then somebody said to me, I've seen this job that I think you should go for. It's head of music in Church of England school. And I'd never even thought about teaching in a school, never mind a Church of England one. But they said, "You're a Christian, aren't you? So you should go and teach at a Church of England school."
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember turning up, and I did get the job against the odds a bit. But I remember like I was given a year seven tutor group first year, as many new teachers are, and just thinking these people are so small.
Right.
Do your parents know you're here? So,
Yeah.
I was used to teaching adults and everything. So
Hilarious.
yeah, and then it kind of went from there really in terms of getting involved in the Church of England's work locally and then nationally. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, before we move on, you got to tell us the name of the band and what you did in the band.
Oh, okay. Well, it was called Coastal June,
Coastal
and
June.
yeah, so we thought that was quite cool.
Yeah.
And I played keyboards and all the programming and stuff. It's a kind of pop rock band sort of thing. So
Love it.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure everyone will be.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, don't. Luckily, it's before like YouTube and Spotify and everything,
Oh
so
no.
you can't actually get any sort of really embarrassing videos of me playing in whatever.
Damn it.
But yeah,
Well, there
yeah,
we go. Well, their loss is our gain, so that's good
exactly.
news. Brilliant. Well, let's get started with the kind of the the bits of the podcast. For anyone who's new to it, we have a series of set kind of elements, I suppose, that the guest gets to choose ahead of time, all with the idea that we get to know a little bit more about them as a person. And so the first one is what we call a fast friends question, which is the kind of created to, well, create connection really as quickly as possible. And Andy chose this one. If you could wake up tomorrow having gained any one quality or ability, what would it be? So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, this might be a bit existential,
Go on.
but I've wondered many times in life that you take particular like decisions that affect like where you work or where you
Hmm.
live or whatever, and you come to the realization you can only really live one life,
Right.
which is a reality, of course. But I wondered whether there would be a superpower that you could like live
Ooh.
multiple
Yeah.
existences all at the same time. So for example, like could I, you know, have the life that I lead at the moment, but also, live in Tokyo
Yeah.
or something,
Oh yeah. Your pop star life. You could have your pop star
Well,
life and your.
exactly, and not even like I'm not even thinking like, could I, be a pop star and could I also be like the world 100 meters champion or something? I just mean like just
Okay.
normal life, but just
Right.
in a random town in
Yeah.
Germany or something, or India or whatever. And could I?
Okay.
But I think that when you're sort of full of zest for life, you're keen to
Yeah.
take opportunities, but you can only take one opportunity. You've only
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
one thing, haven't you? So the superpower would be kind of the ability to live multiple and
Got
multiple existences.
parallel lives. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah, 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 yeah. And that's not
Does,
because I don't like my current life.
yeah.
I really love it. Love my family, love my kids, all of that. It's nothing like
Quick,
that.
quick,
But
say
it's
that. Quick, say that.
yeah, exactly. But I was just
Um,
thinking, like, what if you could do multiple things? And
yeah.
maybe, yeah, yeah.
That's great. Do the other lives continue, or do they pause when you're in the other one?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's probably some films that explore this concept, but yeah,
Yeah.
would there be a way that, as a sort of an overseer of my multiple existences, like my
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
ultimate conscience could,
Yes.
be watching like six different things unfold and think, hey, it's really. I don't know. Would each identity be aware of
Love
it?
it.
I mean, this.
Oh
I mean, if
God,
there's
we're getting
anyone
right
listening
into it
from
now.
Hollywood, this could. If this is not, this probably is a film already. If it's not, then yeah, I hope someone's listening who can make that happen. Yeah.
Brilliant. That sounds like a good power to have, and not to again. I'll say this quickly so I don't put the podcast on a negative slant. But it was my birthday last week, and I think for the first time I was like, "Oh, I'm running out of time. Oh God!" Like that realization of like you're older than you think, and there's less time left than you think. So I think yeah, I'll share that ability if I can. Um, Brilliant. Well, let's move on to your first ignition point. And again, if you're new to the podcast, the idea is that we ask guests to locate, either people or experiences or events from their lives that have had some sort of transformational impact. And it's good for me because I only ever get the kind of the title and then obviously the guest has to expand on that. And so the first one I've got here, it says having a coffee with Nigel. So who is Nigel, and what was that all about?
Yeah. So this is going back like I don't know, like it's 2012 or something like that, and I was vice principal at this school in Nottingham, the Nottingham Emmanuel School, Church of England Academy, and a mentor at the time who I was talking to about my career and where it might go and all of that. I was saying like one of the things that yeah, like many teachers and leaders, like you kind of you're sort of basically trapped in a system that you can't actually. Most of the main things that are frustrating about the education system, teachers and leaders have no agency over at all, because other people are basically making the rules of the game, and you have to play that game. And you can see that even this year, like new Ofsted framework, already social media is now beginning slowly but surely to be populated by new badges of success. We got this, and it's just
Yeah,
a new. And I guess what I was thinking as a kind of senior leader at that time is like, how do you actually influence that? I
right.
mean, how do you do that? And I kind of had a sense that I'd love somehow in my career to be able to influence some thinking around that, around education policy and leadership and all of that. And I was talking to a mentor who was informally supporting me at the time, thinking my career through and everything. And she said, "Oh, well, you should." There's a new guy who's just started leading the Church of England's work in education. He's called Nigel Genders. You should, if
Right.
you can, you should get a coffee with him. And I was like, okay, well, how do you even go about doing
Yeah.
that? And she said, well, maybe there are conferences that he's speaking at or whatever. Anyway, about a year later, the 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 diocese had a conference in Nottingham, and I was at it. And this guy, who at that point I didn't know, Nigel, he was speaking at this conference, and I'm certain he will not remember this, but it was quite positive to me. I was like, "That's the guy she said I should talk to."
Yeah.
But I'm sitting around the table. How do I even get to it? And I was, I'm actually quite good at networking now at events, but at that point, I was a super baby novice at it, and I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
there must be a way of somehow bumping into this guy
Right.
over coffee or whatever. And anyway, it wasn't massively overly manufactured, but I ended up in the queue for the coffee behind
Right.
him.
No way.
Behind him. So he wasn't thinking, I wonder who's behind me. I wonder if I could talk to him. So I
Yeah.
basically had to tap him on the shoulder and say, this is a bit random, but are you Nigel? And my
Yeah.
friend said I should talk to you. And he probably won't remember it at all. But the response that he gave to me at that time was really encouraging. Like he gave me his card, said he'd come and
Right.
visit the school, let's stay in touch. Da, 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 da. And now fast forward to
Yeah.
2026. He's my closest colleague. Yeah, yeah. So it
Oh my
was, yeah,
goodness.
yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, yeah,
How is that? That is incredible, isn't it? And all the things that had to come together for that to happen.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Really.
I think life doesn't work out like that all the time. There's lots
No.
of other times where I've been like, I really need to meet this person, and you just
Yeah.
can't meet them or whatever. So it doesn't make for such a good story. But
No.
that probably did set me on the path of thinking, oh well, maybe there would be a way of somehow getting involved nationally. But because I was
Yeah.
just a regular vice principal in a normal school in Nottingham, so
I was I did a launch pad in volume two called Creating Collisions, because I was reading about how some of the big organizations like Apple and Pixar and all that are now creating their working environments to facilitate kind of organic collisions between people, which I thought was fascinating.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and then the only other link that I've got from my own story was that I got invited when I was doing the teaching awards thing. I got invited to some posh dinner in London. It was one of my first kind of like kid from the country goes to the big city sort of thing.
yeah.
And I was really nervous, and it was always like, the first time someone, it was like out of a movie, someone had given me a canapé. Do you know what I mean? That sort of, I was that
Okay,
kind of like fresh about it, and there was a dinner element to it, and as I looked on the sort of the board of where I was supposed to be sat, I noticed that it was an IT related kind of thing. The vice principal of Dell was on my table, and I thought, whoa,
right.
wow, he's a guy I need to speak. He would be a good one to speak to. As I approached the table, I noticed he was way on the other side of the table. So I was a bit disappointed. But as I turned around, there was no one else in the room. So I just thought, I'm just going to switch the name tags. So I literally moved his name tag next to mine.
Did you?
I know.
Oh
At
my
the time,
God.
I know I felt a bit naughty doing it. But anyway,
I
long
love that.
to end the story, he came and sat down and we chatted the whole time. And it was fascinating. And I told him I was kind of, at that time, pre drugs revelation, obsessed with Lance Armstrong. He then very quickly said, "Oh yeah, I go out cycling with Lance sometimes. I just thought,
No.
and I was like, no, this is not happening to me." And then to finish the story, at the end, he kind of almost gestured across the room to somebody, and this younger lad came across, and he just said, "Chris, are you around tomorrow?" It was like the Bet conference, and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Let's get Chris on the teacher panel for the Dell event tomorrow, and can we get him a GX58 to take back to school and play with?" And so suddenly, I like the next day, I was speaking in this Dell thing, and I got given a free laptop, all because of that kind of organic collision. So yeah, similar sort of thing, I suppose.
Wow, that's
Fascinating.
amazing.
It's a good
Do you
story.
know, do you know, do you know what? Firstly, that's a really cool story. But secondly, I'm now thinking swapping the name tags.
Right.
I've been to a few events recently where you kind of seated at a dinner or something, and you're like
Right.
checking out who you're sitting next to, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, I wish I was over there.
Oh,
Oh,
dear. Well, there you go.
that's a good tip, right? So
Fakers, bakers.
anyone listening to this who somehow in the future sits next to me, you'll never know now
Whether you were supposed to or not.
whether you're supposed to or not. Yeah,
How
yeah,
funny. Okay, right.
brilliant.
Well, let's crack on with the. So we're going to do your first launchpad, and again, I'll share it on the screen and talk through what I was thinking when I first made it, and then we'll just ask you
Hmm.
why it resonated with you. And for those that are watching on video, you'll get to see it, and for those not, I will explain as best as possible. So Andy chose this one, which the title says, "The best time to plant a tree is," and it kind of links to this idea that 10 years ago or however many years ago, and it got me thinking about the idea that leaders, they have to make long-term investments in both themselves and others if you want to kind of reap the maximum reward. So it's got a kind of proactive, I guess, nature to it. So I started thinking that what things link to that. Well, I guess relationships are a good example. You can't just rock up and expect a relationship to be really, really strong. You have to invest in it. If you want to create kind of community and belonging and trust and all those sorts of things. So then I started thinking, well, how could I proactively do that? What could I, plant, so to speak? And I tripped over this phrase non-transactional time
Hmm.
because I think there's a danger in there that people are so busy and all that stuff that everything we do is for a reason. It's transactional. I'm doing this for you and you're going to do that for me. And we rarely have, I mean, to go back to that idea of organic collisions, we rarely protect time or a given time to maybe just, I don't know, yeah, do things more organically. I mean, the open communication is now obviously well known across the piece that the more honest and vulnerable we are, the stronger relationships we build. And then, of course, this idea of building relationships, a lot of that comes from recognition and reinforcement. Um, and so, yeah, I was just playing around then with what that would create, and this idea of relational credit or having kind of a strong balance in the account, psychological safety, and then belonging and mattering. I then went on to sort of expertise because, again, it's not one of those things that you can just arrive at. You know, if you've got aspirations for a certain position or role or job, you kind of have to start investing in that way way early. So thinking about the knowledge, the skills, and experience that you may need, and also this is a good opportunity to flip it from a leadership point of view. You know, do are you helping other people to plant the seeds they need? Are you helping other people's succession planning and so to speak to create the knowledge, skills, and experiences they might need 10 years in the future? So again, I started thinking about what we could do for others or for ourselves. And I guess the first thing is to create opportunity for others. We might be able to create kind of more formal mentoring and coaching relationships. And then the obvious thing is putting people on training or providing training. Um, and naturally, that will then give them the experience that can then be used. But also, it might improve their kind of an awareness and agency and also understanding. And then the last one I thought about, which again I seem to trip into or trip up or fall into quite a lot recently, where I'm speaking to leaders about or speaking to people about what they value most in leaders. And a lot of it comes back to the person, and empathy and approachableness and all that sort of stuff. And so I thought that maybe emotional intelligence is another thing that you rarely just get overnight. It takes a long time. You have to invest in your levels of self awareness and self management if you want greater kind of interpersonal and also interdependent success. And I guess the obvious thing to do as early as possible is to become a reflective practitioner, is to be sort of conscious of what you're doing every day and the impact, to try and, to think a little bit more about kind of, if you haven't got a critical friend, then seeking them out. I mean, most people can lean on or point to somebody who helps them develop because they are challenging and critical and that sort of thing. And then I don't think we should underestimate the power of practice. Like, one of my soapbox things is the fact that as leaders we rarely practice as much as we did when we were teachers. Like, if you spoke to leaders and said, what are you purposefully trying to practice this week, which bit of your leadership, there would probably be some sort of tumbleweed moments. And so the last thing I thought, the upshot of kind of investing in these things is that greater level of self-awareness, the ability to kind of mitigate your own biases, and then obviously the ability to manage yourself or to kind of control actions after that. But that was kind of what I was thinking when I made it. But why did it resonate with you when you saw it?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's great to hear you walk through that. I'll tell you what. I tell you what resonated with me. I mean, obviously, the first thing that struck me was it was all about the metaphor of a tree, and a lot of our work obviously relates
Of
around
course.
flourishing. So the eye-catching sort of plant growing into a smaller plant, eventually turning into a tree. That caught my eye. But I guess one of the things that I really valued about it was that if we're going to make major changes in anything that we're doing, we have to somehow extend our thinking beyond the short term. We have
Yeah.
to, and that is really difficult in a system that jams school leaders into generally 1 year thinking. Not all, but generally speaking. Whereas I don't know, like different, and so other sectors be jammed into shorter term thinking. Like, I don't know, if you work for the government, you're probably like jammed into even on the day thinking sometimes.
Sure.
Responding really fast. But I think the more that we can make space for the long term, it kind of pays off, because when we stick around in a role for a little while, we learn that it's those longer term relationships that actually are at the heart of it. So for example, when I started this role, working not in just in my normal school where I knew everybody and we're in the same building, I found it really strange because like, you're not there's not even a building to go to. You've got to, so you either get pretty lonely or you need to invest some time in relationships. And
Yeah, yeah,
my instinct was like, you've got to do activity, activity, activity. But unless you build relationships in that kind of non-transactional way, then you can't actually do the things you want to
yeah,
do together anyway, because people trust people at the end of the day.
yeah,
And I could have the most whizzy slides or brochures or whatever, but I just know that unless you have a long-term relationship in prospect, then
yeah.
the education system is just doesn't need any more transactions. It
Sure.
needs more relationships. So that kind of really resonated with me, and it's something that I don't know. I think that it can be under under undervalued when we're thinking even about leadership development. And
Mm.
uh, 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 you know, we as you know, because you're involved in it, we've kind of trying to broaden out our thinking around what it might mean to be a flourishing leader rather than simply to be a kind of instructionally competent
Yeah.
leader. So let's spend a whole unit on the concept of relationships. Some people will be like, oh, relationships, really?
Yeah.
When are we going to get onto the kind of nuts and bolts of what
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually do? But I don't know. I just think that relationships are the nuts and bolts of what we do. If you
Yeah.
don't have that, you can have as many learn that statements as you like. But if you and I don't have a relationship, you're
Yeah.
not we're not moving forward in that way. So I found that you started with that really helpful non-transactional time. That's interesting as well, because in a school context, I think, I don't know if I could do a percentage, but it's going to be upper beyond 90% of
Yeah.
adults' interactions are transactional only.
Yeah.
That it's you're in this, like, you're all in a building. I might bump into you for like 30 to 40 seconds once a week. I might ask you something about, how's your running going, or
Yeah.
how's the kids or whatever. But probably I'm thinking, oh, this is the only time I'll see Chris. I better ask him about his year 10 grades. Chris,
Yeah.
have you
Yeah.
done, and we'll be very transactional. So I think to make space for that, and to create a team culture where people are not thinking, oh, we're just doing the small talk before we get on to the actual
Yeah.
chat. This is relationship building is really important, and I think that relates to what you're saying about emotional intelligence. And
Yeah.
we don't always get that right, because often busyness leads to emotional unintelligence.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I've only got 3 minutes with you,
Yeah.
I've got the potential of really messing that up, right? By like,
Absolutely.
right, well,
Yeah.
this is my 3 minutes. I've got to
Well,
tell you this or whatever.
yeah, and like you said, I think sometimes you can score almost like an own goal by doing some sort of pseudo self-talk. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It comes across as disingenuous, and it's like, I mean, it's that classic kind of, "Hey, how are you? Hey, I'm all right." Are you really interested? I mean, is that just the way we start conversations now?
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely. And I think um, yeah, I think that is a challenge of a system that is based on super busyness. And then I think when you extend it out to across a system, then making space to be and to do life together
yeah,
pays off significantly more than you realize at the time.
yeah,
I mean, I'm now thinking about it in terms of my current role, and how I will have like 30 minutes with a person, and how do I
yeah,
get to know them quickly, and all of that. And I think I do okay at that. But what I've learned from that is, unless you have a kind of next step at the end of a conversation like that, it doesn't ever go anywhere. Like, everyone's
no,
polite and nice, but unless you have a kind of, hey, we could do X, or
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
what,
yeah,
then it doesn't go anywhere. But the thing that it's really made me think about, even in chatting about this, was when I was first teaching at this school in Nottingham, when I was first the head of music. Just a really normal inner city comprehensive school in Nottingham. But what I noted very quickly was that the students were not expecting me to stick around.
really,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
it's really high. It was a really new school, tough part of the city, very high teacher turnover. And yeah, I found that first term in particular really, there was no expectations in place already. You really had to earn. And I remember just thinking, like, I can only make progress here if I relate with these young people. Like, my
right,
teacher technique, or my PowerPoint, or my
yeah,
sequencing, or whatever is not it. I can't be incompetent, but if I don't have
no,
a relationship, this
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah,
a complete waste of everyone's time.
yeah,
And I remember thinking, like, how do I get them to buy into the relationship and everything? And I did some good things in that first year. But the interesting bit was when I came back for the next year in September, it was a total transformation.
Really?
Yeah, because the kids weren't used to a teacher coming
Yeah,
back.
they're like, oh, you
Yeah.
came back.
Oh, are you- oh, okay. We normally sort of see people off like you.
Yeah.
And then it was like overnight, it turned
No.
from a kind of like I'm a random outsider, come on in
Yeah.
front of us, to that's Mr. Wolf. Oh yeah, he's safe. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
Oh
I
yeah.
love that.
And they would, and then I watched them almost. It was almost like they kind of swiveled pivoted their attention onto the new,
Oh, okay.
the new geography teacher, and they were
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
"Have you seen the new
Yeah.
geography teacher? Not like you, is he?" And I was like,
Oh,
"No,
wow.
don't
You've
do that to a
made it.
child."
Well,
I
there we go. That's
it was
that
all
is,
relationship.
yeah.
That's it.
I don't know how many non-leaders, or new teachers listen to the podcast, but that, of course, is an interesting and useful message to them. Certainly, if they're finding it difficult in a new school or difficult getting through the first years, just that there is, this sort of earning your stripes and stuff like that. All right, brilliant. Well, let's move on to your second ignition point, which again is fascinating to read. So I'll be interested to know what this means. But it says sitting on a train next to Lynn 3 weeks before COVID.
Yeah. Okay. So the sort of end of the story is that I co-wrote a book called Flourishing Together with an American author called Lynn Swanner. And it kind of now looks like, oh, well, that must have just naturally happened. Well,
Right.
how obvious that would have happened. But it's again like a sequence of like, you know, serendipitous twists and turns. So we were hosting a visit for about 30 international education leaders from around the world in February 2020.
Right.
And we put loads of time into this and got it all sorted out and everything. And we welcomed them all. And even as they were arriving, it was just beginning to be like, do you remember like, oh, there's some
Yeah.
strange thing going on
Yeah.
in
In
China,
terms of China.
and everyone was like, "Oh no, don't worry about that." But and even during the week, some of them were getting a bit like, "Hmm."
Oh. Yeah.
What? Anyway, we carried on with the visit, and part of the visit was that they would come to our national conference and go and visit a bunch of schools. And one of those visits was to the great city of Durham in the northeast of England. And we
Yeah.
took the train from London to Durham. It's about 3 hours train ride, and I can't really remember whether there was any particular deliberate reason why this happened. Like it wasn't a switching the name tags moment, to your point.
Right.
But anyway, I sat next to Lynn, who I knew a little bit already, and I thought, right, well, we've got 3 hours. We're probably not going to be moving around seats. We may as well like let's
Yeah.
go big on the conversation. I don't particularly know, let's see where this goes. And at some point, around Peterborough or whatever, she explained that she'd done this research on the concept of flourishing in American schools, and I said,
Right.
oh, that's really interesting. And she said, do you think it'd be useful to schools in England? And she showed it me on her laptop and everything. And the concepts were really interesting, but it was quite researchy.
Right.
And I said, I think the concept's good, but I don't think busy school teachers will actually read that because it's a bit too
Yeah.
researchy. What if we did something together to kind of bring it to life? And then the chat kind of carried on, and you sort of like you guaranteed a 3 hour conversation if you sit next to somebody on a train. Right? So
Oh, absolutely.
anyway, the long and the short of this, by the time we got to Durham, we'd basically said, well, what if we could actually write something? I'd never written a book, don't know anything about writing a book, anything like that, but she had. And so she had got all like, well, we'd need to make this proposal and da 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 da.
Okay.
Um, and and anyway, that was a great train ride, and we decided that we would do it, only to find out that 3 weeks later the world shut down.
Yeah.
And I've always reflected that if we'd have booked, like we prearranged that trip maybe 12 months before they all came, and if we'd have got 3 weeks out, they would have never come. We'd have
Right.
never made any of these international partnerships. That book wouldn't
No.
exist for sure. And dot 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 dot. And
Yeah. Wow.
So that was yeah, I really really and obviously then when it was COVID, we had a bit more space to actually think about um, some of the writing. So yeah,
Yeah,
that book probably only exists because of that train journey, I
I
think.
love that. And it makes me think back to what we just talked about then, that I wonder whether the length of the conversation had to be that long to get to that action point.
Yeah, I wonder because we obviously didn't just talk about that for 3 hours. We talked
No.
about our families and kids and
Yeah.
stories and all of that. But I suppose what I'm reflecting back on is that if I'd just had a meeting with her, particularly because she's based in the States, we probably would have had a quite interesting Zoom
Yeah.
call or whatever. But we were just sitting on a train, and
Yeah.
that was great.
Again, it goes back to that. It was a non-transactional conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it also. The thing about non-transactional stuff, I think I basically agree with that, but with one caveat that I think when you're in a conversation that it, in a school, you're pretty much guaranteed to see the same people again and again, and
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
you're happy about that, and sometimes that's annoying. But
Yeah.
basically, you're trapped in the same organization. Whereas if you if you're only going to see somebody occasionally, as important as the non-transactional thing is, I've also learned that you have to basically decide to land on something at
Yes.
some point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can just end up being quite frustrated. Like, oh, we had a really good chat, and it never really went
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That is
there's a
interesting.
sort there's an art to it, I think, where
Yeah,
you're
and a balance, isn't there? Yeah.
yeah yeah yeah.
Wicked. All right. Well, let's keep pushing on. We're going to move on to your second, second launch pad that you picked, which is, well, you'll find out in a moment. It was a bit of an uncomfortable one for me when I started researching this. So it'll be interesting to see where we go with this. But so the title, for those that aren't looking at the screen, is called the trustworthiness equation, and I'd never heard about this before, but effectively it started me thinking that maybe building trust is more scientific and it needs to be more purposeful than we thought, but also maybe the idea that trust is more developable than we thought. And so I tripped over this research by, I think it's Meister, Green, and Galford is how you pronounce it, but they came up with this idea of the trustworthiness equation, and they suggested that our trustworthiness kind of it equals the sum of our credibility, our reliability, and intimacy, but then divided by our levels of self orientation. And so, to unpack that a little bit more, the idea being that our level of credibility is due to lots of things, but our expertise, our transparency, our track record, and our reputation. And so, as I was following this through, I was thinking, okay, yeah, tick. I'll give myself an amber green for credibility. And then they added reliability. So that's due to our actions, our predictability, our levels of commitment, and our accountability. So again, I was thinking, yeah, I think I'd do pretty well on that. People would, say I was reliable. And then their last one is kind of intimacy. And this is a non educational kind of lens, but for them, it meant kind of our levels of empathy, our levels of vulnerability, whether we can keep confidentiality, and then this idea of positive regard. And so again, I gave myself, a pretty high score for that. But this is where it became a little bit uncomfortable, because this is their suggestion is that the sum of that is then divided by what they call self orientation. And so this kind of unpacks into how self centered we are, what we choose to prioritize, what lens we see situations through, and then how we choose to spend our time and energy. And this was the slightly awkward one because, I mean, my wife tells me all the time how selfish I am, which is very nice of her.
Good,
What we've now,
good way.
over the years of her telling me, like on a weekly basis, I've realised that it's not actually selfishness, because I'm happy to give my time to anybody and all that stuff, but I am very self-centered, as in I hold myself, I view myself as almost the center of my life and the universe. And typically, I think of myself before others, which is something I'm working on. But again, that was slightly awkward because I think that's where I potentially lose points in this trustworthiness game because be I might be seen as kind of doing things for personal gain. Anyway, let's not get too much into that. But the point then was that I started thinking about strategies to, I guess, build trustworthiness. So for leaders that are either trying to do it with this existing relationships or people that maybe have joined a new team or, well, I mean, yourself is a good example, who are now going to have to create lots more kind of relationships and to develop trust with people that you didn't have kind of connections with before. This idea of kind of maximizing our credibility by making sure that all of our decisions are rooted in evidence. And when I say evidence, I mean sort of, I don't know, objectiveness is probably a better word. Then this idea that we can maximize our reliability by potentially under promising and over delivering, as a simple way of doing that. Maximizing intimacy by creating safe spaces for dialogue, and then minimizing our self orientation by sharing the spotlight and credit with other people, and then minimizing self orientation by absorbing kind of blame and potentially workload. So that was kind of what I was thinking when I tripped over it. But why did this one resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it's great that you're explaining it in that way. Actually, walking your way through. I mean, I think the thing that yeah, the thing that really stuck out to me. Sorry, was the idea of what it means to trust, and I think that is yeah, I think that's completely central to effective teaching.
Yeah.
Um, like classically, follow through on what you said, and that pupils need to, yeah, I mean, they need to have a relationship with you, as I said before they're going to learn anything. But I think when we're thinking about leaders, then we're really looking to be led by people that we can trust, not people who are perfect or make no mistakes, but people that, in broad terms, we can lean into and lean on through the ups and downs. And I think that is not given as much attention as it probably deserves, particularly when we've based the entire school reform system on something called a multi-academy trust. So it's actually like our number one noun for talking about a group of schools.
Oh man.
And obviously that that whoever coined that term wasn't thinking of it in relational terms particularly, but I think the fact that that is right at the heart of our system is not just an interesting sort of semantics. It's really important. Like if we're
Yeah.
going to work, I'm the head of one school and you're the head of the other school. If we're going to work together in what we call something called a trust, well, that is not a multi-academy hierarchy or a multi-academy if that. I think that's pretty important, seeing as we use that so much. And the other thing that it made me think about when I was reading it was that it takes us towards a do I trust you, do you trust me, kind of like relational thing.
Yeah.
But I think also for us as leaders, when we're thinking about the future, it a certainty is that every educational leader is going to lead in an uncertain
Yeah.
context. That's a certainty. So
Yeah.
so, and it feels like that uncertainty is not getting like easier to predict; it's getting harder to predict. So, um, could you predict in 2030 the community cohesion of the city of Bristol?
Right. No.
No,
No chance.
there is absolutely no way you could predict that. But could you say, I'd like to be a school leader in Bristol and contribute something to better community cohesion? Well,
Yeah.
of course you could, but you're literally going to lead into a space not nothing about, but you can't predict it in any way.
No.
And I think when I'm thinking myself about in my own leadership, trust is actually one of the biggest concepts. It's obviously not unrelated to the concept of faith as well, and
Right.
what that means, and that sort of. I don't know how well known the quote is, but it's really impacted me from Martin Luther King. Like you don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step, is what
Nice.
he said, and I think that it's just as well because if you're leading in school, there's no way you can see the whole
No.
staircase.
No.
And by the time you get up the staircase, someone will have changed the staircase anyway. So how do you? I think it's a really like trust is a sort of relational thing, but it's also an internal thing where I'm
Mm.
thinking, right, well, what do I know? What do I need to know? And what can I not know? And therefore, what do I need to simply trust that we're moving in we've got a clarity of vision, we've got a clarity of values, and when we make a step forward, we'll learn more about the future once we've moved forward. But we
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we won't just abandon what we think or believe once we've made that step forward. As opposed to sometimes people are quite reticent and you know like for example, we're talking about trust, for example. Like, people have very different views on like should schools be academies and should they work in trust and all that, but do many people think a school would honestly be better off just on its own?
Yeah.
I mean, like, does anyone really think that? Like, ideally in 2040, we are just totally on our own. Like, we just
Yeah.
want to be isolated.
Yeah.
The ideal would be just keep us in. No one really thinks that, but there's a lot of uncertainty of what would it mean if we were in the same. Oh, you'd be telling me what to do, Chris. You'd make
Yeah,
my
yeah,
kids
yeah.
wear your uniform or whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
sometimes we need to be able to take just the step and trust that. And that will come across perhaps a little bit sometimes. Maybe that's a bit naive. That you should.
Mm.
I think informed steps forward
Yeah,
is what
nice.
leadership isn't it? So
Yeah, I love that informed steps forward. And another thing that struck me that idea of the only thing that's certain is uncertainty. That's a funny thing.
yeah, it's sort of depressing or exciting
Oh
depending
yeah,
on
but
how
it's
you see the world. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but also I think for me when I was thinking about this as well is that we talked about relational credit and trust is the same thing, isn't it? That you won't have the same levels of trust with every individual. They will have levels of credit like you would do in kind of in accounts, and I think that's an interesting reflection for leaders or anybody to think about. Where are my most trusting relationships? Where is it a bit weaker? Where do I need to invest in that? And potentially the trustworthiness equation gives us some ways that we can at least, like you said, take that first step to developing it. Okay, well, sadly, we've come to the end of the podcast, but we've got one last question, which you've chosen. It's another Fast Friends question, and interesting to hear what you're going to say about this one. So it says, when did you last cry in front of another person? Tell us about that. Are you a big crier?
Well, I think we all need to be more open to expressing these emotions.
Yeah, me too.
And I think that's a particular issue for men in leadership. I
Mm,
think it's particularly related to healthy mental health and all
yeah.
of that. So I'm not about to burst into tears on this podcast, I don't think, but
Do it.
I think it would be a mark of a strong relationship with someone, going back to what we've just been talking about, where that wasn't a moment of where that wasn't a moment of judgment or
Yeah.
pigeonholing. If anyway, the moment that I'm talking about though is a bit more personal, which is this will shock people to know, but I have a daughter who just started university. It's shock horror, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, you're in your 20s, aren't you?
Exactly, exactly. How could that physically be true? But anyway, she has, and she's actually gone to study in Amsterdam. So
Oh,
she's
wow.
actually living in a different country for the next few years, and obviously that's a big deal, isn't it? But it's basically really exciting and devastating all at the same time. I
Yeah.
don't think I don't think I've experienced this kind of emotional, like it's like two massive rivers
Yeah.
flowing into this kind of, I don't know what you call that in geography. Some geography teachers will know what that's called, when there's a convergence of the
Yeah.
two things that turns into. But there's a kind of term. I mean, it's so exciting. I'm so as a parent, I'm like, this is amazing. And then as a parent, I was like, we dropped her off, and I'm sitting on the Eurostar back from Amsterdam. I was just like crying the whole way home,
Yeah.
and my
Wow.
my other daughter was like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am all right." But yeah, that was probably the last time that the tears were flowing,
I
but
love
probably
it.
for
That's
good
so
reason.
great, isn't it? And it's so nice to be excited for someone else as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I was basically like, "This is amazing," but then I
yeah.
was like, "Oh, this is like a real chapter change in our lives," and
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
And is
But
she the eldest? Have you got more of those sorts of
yeah,
experiences coming up?
there's two daughters. Yeah, so Emily's in year 12 at the moment. So
Wow.
yeah, more to come on that,
So
I
you're
imagine.
saving up some tears for that one as well.
Yeah, I suppose I better make sure that I'm just as emotionally in tune at that
Oh
moment
yeah!
as
Wow, that would be really awkward. You
yeah.
didn't cry for you didn't you didn't. Why are
Yeah,
you not crying
she
for
won't
me?
know though because I'll have dropped her off. So
That's true. That's good. Brilliant. Well, again, thanks ever so much for coming on.
no
How
worries.
can people connect with your work? I mean, I'll put the link to the book, but how can they connect with you and your work?
Oh, yeah. So probably the fastest way is through my LinkedIn, the National Society for Education. That confusingly, that isn't some other random charity. That is actually the Church of England's technical charity name for its work in education. So if you look that up, you'll find a bunch of that stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, again, yeah, thanks ever so much, and thanks to everyone who's listening. If you're interested in any of the Launchpad stuff, then yeah, get in touch with me, and yeah, we'll see you at the next one.
Great. Thanks, Chris.